Now, I'm probably different than almost all the folks who are going to speak to you today. I agreed to come here when Dave and Steve asked me to, because I knew that you all would be here, that a lot of potential candidates would be here, and therefore the media would be here. And I wanted to come to talk about something that I think is extraordinarily serious and not political in any normal sense. It's about America's survival. And I want to say to you flatly that almost 14 years after 9/11, the United States today is losing the war with radical Islamists. And we have to have the courage to confront how badly we are doing in this war. And not just as an anti-Obama comment. The State Department was about equally bad, frankly, under George W. Bush. The unwillingness to tell the truth about who our enemies are was equally bad after the first year, because gradually all of these so-called experts kept saying, oh, you can't really tell the truth about who they are because that might confuse other people, and so why don't you make up strange terms? And, you know, it became bizarre. You see people all around the planet. This is a global war. And yet they insist on talking about it by geography. So we're going to really focus on northern Syria. Well, there are thousands of jihadists who have come to northern Syria from all around the world. Over 1,000 from France alone. So over 600 from Great Britain. Over 100 from the United States. This is a global war. In Nigeria, Boko Haram has 10,000 fighters. And last year, Boko Haram killed more people than Ebola. But the State Department for years under Secretary Clinton wouldn't even list them as a terrorist group, even though their initial base camp was called Afghanistan in honor of the Taliban. Now, you would think somewhere in here people get a hint. You know, I look around the planet at suicide bombings, I look at beheadings, I look at all these different things going on. They don't strike me as a Rotary Club conspiracy or, you know, the Kiwanians running amok. There is one common pattern occurring everywhere across the planet, and that is radical Islamists who hate our civilization, are prepared to cut off our heads, and are determined to impose their religion by force. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about President Obama's pathological incapacity to deal with reality, because I think that's what it is. I mean, there's no point in trying to get him to learn how to say the words radical Islamist, because he has a speech impediment which blocks him from being able to say the words. I mean, he just, you know, it would be embarrassing. Watching John Kerry the other day try to explain all this, it's not about religion, it's about specific, unique, random individuals. So you end up at Fort Hood with somebody who's carrying a card that says Soldier of Allah, somebody who we now know was on the internet talking to an American imam in Yemen, who we later on killed with a predator, somebody who jumps up, yells Allahu Akbar, and kills 13 Americans. And even the institution of the U.S. Army is so corrupted by the intellectual dishonesty we now live with, they described it as a workplace incident. This is as though in 1946 and 1947 and 1948 we'd had Henry Wallace instead of Harry Truman, and we'd had a president who said, you know, there is no KGB, there is no Comintern, the Soviet Union is not a threat, communism's okay, I don't think you should be worried about all these things. And that's where we are. We have an elite, frankly, in both parties, unwilling to tell the truth. You're not going to win this war if you can't tell the truth. You're not going to win this war if you can't admit it's a war. I would urge all of you to go back and look at President George W. Bush's magnificent speech to the joint session of Congress shortly after 9/11. There he said, there's an axis of evil. And he listed Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. Now, he could have added a few more countries. I mean, several of them felt hurt that they weren't on the list. But it was a good start. And that's the speech in which he said, you're either for us or you're against us. But the State Department and others promptly began saying, well, you can't really mean that. I mean, you're really prepared to go to the Saudis and say to them, you're either for us or you're against us, and cut off all of their funding for all the different elements that preach Sharia? Are you really prepared to take on the argument about Sharia? Now, you have a new leader in Egypt who is remarkably like Mubarak, who is remarkably like Sadat. That is, he's a military leader dominating a country by force because the alternative is a Muslim Brotherhood radicalized Egypt threatening to the United States and the entire world. Now, I will tell you flatly, while I would love to see the Egyptian people be prosperous and free and have a chance to live in a genuine democracy, I am not, just as I was not confused by communists who were very eager to have one vote one time in Italy and France, I am not confused by the Muslim Brotherhood, which would like to use our language to impose their way of life and never again have an election once they're in charge. So I think we've got to recognize this is as intellectually significant a fight as the development of anti-communism was between 1945 and 1950. In the middle of the 1930s, as the British leadership showed total cowardice and were terrified of dealing head-on with Adolf Hitler, one man actually read Mein Kampf. His name was Winston Churchill. And he said, you know, I think this guy actually means what he's saying. And he began giving speeches, and he was a very lonely voice. At one point, he was down to 4 members voting with him out of 635. But he said, the truth is so important. And finally, day by day, Hitler proved that Churchill was right and the entire elite was wrong. Now, I believe we are in that kind of environment. I believe our government lies to us every day about this. I believe our State Department lies about it. I think our intelligence community has been co-opted intellectually. I think our military is frightened to tell the truth. And I think, starting with the Congress, we have to demand that we deserve to know the truth, and we, the people, deserve the right to defend our civilization.